In this video, we're going to be looking at the 9070 XT against the 5070 Ti in the newly released Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced. The 9070 XT in this video is being represented by the ASRock Monster Hunter Wilds Edition, which I received as a review sample, and the 5070 Ti in this video is being represented by the Asus Prime model, which I also received as a review sample. Both are running at their out-of-the-box settings on a high-end benchmarking PC based on a 9800X 3D platform. Full system specs in the video description. And before we go any farther with the benchmarks, where I'll cover native resolution, upscaling, 1440p, 4K, variety of graphics settings, ray tracing settings, etc., I'll also mention that I got my copy at Games Planet, and I did become a Games Planet affiliate after turning down a whole bunch of other key site affiliate offers. The reason is a lot of them are gray markets, or you can't confirm whether they are or are not gray markets and how they're sourcing their keys. I researched Games Planet thoroughly, and they source their keys directly from game publishers, so the people making the game are actually getting paid for it, but you are actually getting a discounted price anyway. And I do get affiliate commissions through the link, full disclosure, and you can use my promo code Daniel to get 14% off either the standard or deluxe edition, and I will include a link in the video description and or pinned comment. Now, before we continue with the side-by-side 9070 XT versus 5070 Ti footage, I also want to look a little bit at the graphics settings, especially the ray tracing settings, because this game does seem to be designed around ray tracing, so I thought we should look at the performance, impact, and scaling and the side-by-side visual quality of the different ray tracing options. So this is 5070 Ti and all of the footage just for a like-for-like baseline. On the left, you're seeing the maximum ray tracing settings, RT Extended, which includes both ray-traced global illumination as well as specular reflections. In the middle, you're seeing RT Standard, which has ray-traced global illumination, but does not have the ray-traced specular reflections. On the right-hand side, you're seeing the hardware-based ray tracing turned off. And then it has a software-based fallback that's not relying on the hardware-based ray tracing acceleration. That allows compatibility on GPUs that don't have hardware-based ray tracing support, or just gives you the option of turning it off for performance reasons. So I did want to measure the performance impact. So I'm otherwise leaving the graphics settings untouched. So the graphics presets don't seem to change the ray tracing effects, although they do change the ray tracing quality, which I think means it's changing the number of rays cast per pixel. So I've left the underlying graphics preset here as the maximum, which is ultra high, so the ray tracing effects are also at their highest quality settings, and this is at native 4K resolution. And we're seeing 41 FPS at the absolute max settings on the 5070 Ti with the ray tracing extended, 45 FPS on the RT Standard, which is the global illumination without the specular reflections. It's a 10% faster. And then turning the hardware-based ray tracing off and relying on the software-based global illumination gains 20% performance over the RT Extended by hitting 49 FPS average. Now, I'll apologize that the side-by-side footage is not completely identical. I'm using the game's built-in benchmark tool, which so you could run yourself if you have the game and kind of compare against my results, which is nice. But it doesn't play out exactly the same way, especially in that ship battle every single time. So I do apologize for those small differences. Now, one thing I also wanted to check, though, is if the ray tracing performance scaling changes when you're using upscaling compared to native resolution, because oftentimes that actually is the case with ray tracing, because a huge amount of the performance impact of ray tracing can be kind of a per pixel thing, and by lowering the internal resolution, by here using DLSS performance mode with the 4K output, we're casting far fewer rays overall, I believe. And so I noticed and kind of expected this might be the case, that actually the performance impact of using the ray tracing settings is not as high when you're using upscaling aggressively like we're seeing here. So here the RT extended, which includes the global illumination and specular reflections, hits 85 FPS, which is now very usable on the 5070 Ti. And honestly, you could probably get by with a less aggressive upscale, especially, I would probably play this style of game on a controller personally, in which case I don't need quite as high of frame rates to feel nice and smooth as I do when playing like a first-person shooter on a mouse and keyboard or something. Anyway, if you go down to the RT standard, you only gain 5% performance here. This is hitting 89 FPS now, and turning ray tracing all the way off and relying on the software-based fallback is only gaining 13% compared to the maximum settings when using this upscaling. So I think if you're going to be relying heavily on upscaling in this game, you might actually want to consider just keeping the ray tracing maxed out if you're hitting decent frame rates. So it looks like a 5070 Ti can max this game out at 4K as long as you're willing to use upscaling to get there, but still able to reach what I would consider high frame rates for a single player game at otherwise maxed out settings. Now, another thing that I wanted to look at was turning down the non-ray traced settings. So here I went with RT standard on both the left-hand side and the right-hand side, and I'm using the performance mode upscaling with the 4K output because I think most people playing at high resolutions will rely on upscaling, although I know not everybody. But here I'm looking at ultra high on the left and high on the right. Now this game's graphics presets, this is actually a couple of notches down. So ultra high is the maximum graphics preset, whereas high comes after very high. So it goes ultra high, then very high, then high. Now, turning down the graphics presets adjusts settings beyond ray tracing, so there's other settings being changed here for sure, but I think that overall, the high settings are still looking quite good. Now, in addition to turning down the non-ray tracing settings, it also adjusts the ray tracing quality, which, like I said, I think is impacting the number of rays cast per pixel, but we're still using RT standard on both sides, which is giving us the RT global illumination on both sides, but not the RT specular reflections. Now, I'll be honest, I think that like I said, the side on the right is still looking quite good here. Now, you only gain 17% performance though, so on this GPU going from 90 to 105 might not be worth it. But if you were chasing a little bit of performance, I do think that the high settings still look quite good relative to the ultra high, max preset here. So I think that'd be a fair way to gain some performance if you'd like. Now, let's go ahead and get into the main attraction for the video, that 9070 XT against 5070 Ti. So let's start with 1440p because I think that's really the target resolution for a lot of people who buy this class of GPU. And at maximum settings, native 1440p, I'm using native TAA rather than using DLAA or FSR AA, specifically so that I can give them an apples-to-apples workload, whereas actually if using these GPUs, I might use DLAA or FSR for native AA, but this gives an apples-to-apples comparison before we kick on the upscalers. So at apples-to-apples comparison, at maximum ray tracing, maximum settings overall, native 1440p, actually the 9070 XT is ahead despite the maxed out ray tracing, only by 3% though, 2 FPS at 64 versus 62. Let's go ahead and skip ahead to what if we then do turn on FSR and DLSS balanced. Well, we get a huge performance boost. We're up to 99 FPS on the 9070 XT, up against 90 FPS on the 5070 Ti. So that's a 10% lead now, so it grew a bit for the 9070 XT. Now, when looking at the side-by-side footage, though, if I look at the fine details in the tree leaves and, the stones in the background, the real fine details, I do think the DLSS image is a little bit sharper, gets a little bit more of that detail. I'm kind of looking at the back stones on that back wall right now. I do think they're coming in with a little more clarity with DLSS, but I think both are extremely usable. FSR is looking very good here, and I'm kind of nitpicking those differences. Now, honestly, both of these GPUs were hitting around 60 FPS without any upscaling at completely maxed out settings. So you don't have to use the upscaler here, and you could probably also just get by with quality level upscaling if you preferred. But I think this is showing that you can hit a nice high refresh rate 1440p experience at max settings plus upscaling, or you can hit a nice solid 60-ish FPS at max settings with no upscaling on either of these GPUs. So you're going to be having a good time at 1440p on either of these GPUs in this game, although the 9070 XT is a little bit faster at native and 10% faster at balanced level upscaling using the game's built-in benchmark. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at native 1440p again. This is the ultra high graphics preset, but with the RT turned down to standard. So we're looking at the global illumination ray tracing, but not the specular reflections, but otherwise the game is maxed out. Now we're hitting 72 FPS on the 9070 XT and 68 FPS on the 5070 Ti. Would have been nice to get one more FPS on the 5070 Ti, but alas, it's a 6% lead on the 9070 XT. Both still look really good here. So again, you can absolutely play this game at native 1440p at, in this case, nearly maximum settings, just losing out on the RT specular. And like I said, if you're playing this game on a controller, I think this is a pretty good frame rate for a single player title. Let's go ahead and skip ahead to using upscaling though. So with balanced level upscaling turned on at those ultra high settings with the RT standard, it's 104 FPS on the 9070 XT, which now puts it 11% faster than the 5070 Ti, which is hitting 94. So good experience on both, but 11% lead for the 9070 XT. And same thoughts on the image quality. If I look at the castle wall in the background, you know, I think I'm seeing a little sharper on the textures on the DLSS side, but overall looking pretty good on both. Let's go ahead and look at native resolution again, but this time with ray tracing turned off, but otherwise maxed out settings with the ultra high preset. So relying on the software-based global illumination, we're now hitting 81 FPS on the 9070 XT, which makes it 11% faster than the 5070 Ti, which is hitting 73. Good frame rates on both, very playable experience, but personally I'd probably keep the ray tracing on since these GPUs had the performance to do it. Let's go ahead and take a look at the ray tracing off, ultra high preset, but now upscaling at the balanced level. It's now 111 FPS on the 9070 XT, which makes it 5% faster than the 5070 Ti, which is hitting 106 FPS. Let's go ahead and skip forward to native 1440p again, but this time we're turning down from the ultra high preset to the high preset. So that's 2 notches down. It goes ultra high, very high, high, and we're on the RT standard rather than the RT extended. So we still get the RT global illumination, but not the specular reflections, but this is native 1440p. And we're hitting 89 FPS on the 9070 XT, which is putting it 10% faster than the 5070 Ti, which is hitting 81 FPS. And I think that, you know, hitting around 90 FPS is quite good for a single player game, especially one that you might play on a controller. So yeah, definitely have some good options. The high graphics preset still looks really good. We're still keeping the ray traced global illumination. So if you're looking for a slightly kicked down, but still looks quite good graphics settings at native resolution here to get around 90 FPS on the 9070 XT, I'm not saying that this is exactly optimized settings, but I think it does still look quite good here. Now, the 1440p high RT standard, same thing we were just looking at, but now with balance level upscaling, jumps to 126 FPS on the 9070 XT, putting it 9% faster than the 5070 Ti, which reaches 116 FPS at those same settings. Same thoughts on image quality, though. I think the little fine details and textures just come through a little bit sharper with DLSS. But both looking really, really good. Very usable. Now we can look at 4K resolution. So 4K maximum settings, native TAA, neither GPU is probably hitting the frame rates you'd be looking for. 40 FPS versus 41. The 5070 Ti gets its one lead for the video by 3% and 1 FPS at settings you probably wouldn't really use. So what if we kick on performance level upscaling? Now we're seeing at those otherwise maximum settings, 92 FPS on the 9070 XT, which puts it 8% faster than the 5070 Ti's 85 FPS. And same thoughts on image quality. Both look really good. Both are very usable. Performance-wise, you could probably actually get away with a lower, less aggressive performance preset. But at the performance level scaling, like I said, look at the castle wall in the background right now. I think the stone work and things come through a little bit sharper on the DLSS side, but overall usable on both. And the 9070 XT performance-wise has an 8% lead. Let's go ahead and look at native 4K again, but with some somewhat slightly reduced settings. We're still at the ultra high maximum preset, but with the RT set to standard rather than extended. So we lose the RT specular reflections, but we keep the RT global illumination. But it's still a little too heavy for a great experience on these GPUs. 47 FPS on the 9070 XT, making it 4% faster and 2 FPS faster than the 5070 Ti's 45 FPS, but probably not the settings you'd use on these GPUs. One option is kick on upscaling. Probably don't need to go as aggressive as performance mode, but I went with performance mode here anyway, and we're hitting 97 FPS on the 9070 XT, which places it 8% faster than the 5070 Ti's 90 FPS. Very, very good frame rates here though now on both. Same thoughts on the image quality, where I'm kind of looking at the castle wall in the background, looking at the slightly sharper textures on the 5070 Ti, but good looking image, very, very usable on both, and an 8% performance lead for the 9070 XT. Let's jump to native 4K again, this time still at the ultra high maximum graphics preset, but with the hardware-based ray tracing turned off, so it's using the software-based global illumination fallback. And we're now hitting 54 FPS on the 9070 XT, which honestly, on a variable refresh rate display, playing with the controller, that's not a bad experience, even if these aren't necessarily the settings I would use. And the 5070 Ti is hitting 49 FPS, so the 9070 XT does have a 10% lead at these settings. If you did want to use RT off, but otherwise maxed out, but with DLSS and FSR performance mode, you're now hitting 104 FPS on the 9070 XT, making it 7% faster than the 5070 Ti, which reaches 97 FPS at those same settings. So nice high frame rate on both. Probably I would use some of the ray tracing though, rather than go to the software-based fallback, especially if you're already going to be using upscaling, since we were hitting high frame rates without turning off RT on this class of GPU, and same thoughts on image quality with DLSS and FSR that I've mentioned previously. So let's jump into RT standard, but high rather than ultra high settings, but back to native 4K. So in other words, we drop it 2 graphics presets, but the high settings still look pretty good. And we drop the extended RT down to standard RT, so we keep the RT global illumination, and we're trying to do a native 4K output. Well, honestly, pretty close to 60 FPS now. We're at 57 on the 9070 XT and 54 on the 5070 Ti. So the 9070 XT is a little bit closer to that 60 FPS line. It's got a 6% lead. And, you know, on a variable refresh rate display, if you really want to chase a native 4K resolution image, you can do that here and be pretty close to 60 FPS on these GPUs, but you would have to turn it down a little bit farther or use some upscaling if you want to actually match 60 FPS or above. Now, if we do kick on upscaling on those already reduced settings, we're now hitting some pretty high frame rates, 117 FPS on the 9070 XT and 105 FPS on the 5070 Ti. That's an 11% lead for the 9070 XT, and we're still keeping some of that RT global illumination. High settings still look pretty good overall, and my thoughts on the image quality, again, looking at like that castle wall in the background, seeing some sharper textures and etc. on the DLSS side of things, but performance lead for the AMD card. That is all of the graphics tests that I ran here. It was quite a bit if I wasn't skipping through the footage. That was almost 45 minutes of side-by-sides. So how about some final thoughts? So overall, AMD was definitely faster in this game, even when you're maxing out the ray tracing. I did think DLSS had slightly sharper image quality, though, when you are relying on that. Speaking of upscaling, it's not absolutely necessary in this game. At 1440p, you were able to play at native resolution at completely maxed out settings and still be over a 60 FPS average on both GPUs. And I thought that's a pretty good result. Not every game that comes out these days, especially something like the Unreal Engine 5 games that I see, this is using Ubisoft's Anvil engine rather than Unreal Engine 5. Not every game coming out these days does run at 60 FPS or higher at native maximum settings, including ray tracing on these GPUs. So that's not a disastrous, optimization even at the maximum settings. And we saw a lot of scalability on offer, either from using upscaling or slightly reducing graphics settings. So I think you're going to have a really good experience at 1440p native or otherwise, even at max settings on these GPUs. 4K resolution, you're definitely going to be having to rely on upscaling, if not reducing settings, or both, but I do think the upscaling looks pretty good, although DLSS was getting a little bit of an edge on the far details, sharpness of the textures, things like that. So overall, I think these GPUs had a pretty good result in this game. I think you'll have a good time playing it, and don't forget that if you are interested in buying this game, if you do follow my Games Planet affiliate link, I can save you 14% on the standard or deluxe editions. So you could follow that in the link in the video description or pinned comment if you'd like. I hope you guys found the video useful and or interesting, and have an excellent day.